but do you really want the child not to have any contact with his father or his mother, right? I'm sure you counsel them on that too.
Absolutely. And it's unfortunate because people come in there thinking it's the best thing for their kid, and I tell them no. Child psychiatrists say both parents having something. Anyone in a parental role, kids need it. The more the merrier. You know, it's ideal to have that parenting figure from a male perspective and a female perspective. So sometimes I do have to counsel the client, bring them down a notch, saying, look, unless this person was really bad, abusing the child, they saw him doing drugs, doing X, Y, and Z, you know, they need to be in the kid's life, at least in some kind of way. Maybe not on a day-to-day, but on a weekend basis where they're not making doctor's appointments, signing up for school extracurriculars, things of that nature.
You know, one thing that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on is community property. I don't think we talked about community property, separate property, that kind of thing. I'd like to go into that in a little bit if you're down for it.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to community property. And I think that's probably one of the biggest consequences of a divorce or even a marriage before the divorce is dealing with the assets when something happens. So I'd like to get into that in a little bit.
Sure. I mean, so basics for community property, you're kind of stuck with what you have unless you do something in advance. People always ask, okay, how can I get insurance for a divorce? How can you prepare if it happens? A prenuptial agreement, biggest thing. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. What's ours is ours. You can make it that simple where it's 3 buckets and you're putting things, you're not commingling things like that. You can also deal with spousal support to a certain degree in a prenuptial agreement as well. If people have that, they opt out of the legal regime of community property. Assets and gains is the old name.
Get that prenup is what
right.
They
Get
say.
that prenup. You know, especially if you have enough assets. But then a lot of people, and I hear it from women and frankly a few men too, I don't want to do a prenup. Am I dooming my marriage from the start if I get that
And
prenup?
it's an awkward conversation.
Absolutely awkward. And you see the full range of facts. People come in 2 months after the engagement talking about a prenup. Sometimes they don't get married because of it. Some people come 2 weeks before the marriage and talk about it. Does that put a stress on it?
Are you I didn't have to worry about it because I didn't have anything when I got married. Do you have to have that conversation with your client? Okay, you want to pay me to do a prenup? You're broke. You have nothing to protect.
Right.
We cannot protect things that are acquired during the marriage, and you have nothing to protect on your own, so you really don't need a prenup.
Right. Well, you can protect some things that are acquired during the marriage. So if someone has a new business, they start it before the marriage, so it'll be separate property. But what about the fruits and revenues of that business? What about other growth and where they put the funds from that business? All can be very tangled, some very specific laws that have changed in the last 15 years on some of that as things go forward. So even if they are broke, they'll do it. Some people protect the other side from debt, coming in with $200,000 of doctor student loans. You know, are we going to pay that off during the community? Do they have a reimbursement claim for those kind of things? A lot of questions that can come up.
That's a good, for sure. Yeah. So technically, you are broke because you're $200,000 in debt. So we don't want to bring that and make that a marital obligation.
Correct. And it would be a separate property obligation because it's done before. But then there's all these little factors. If you were going to school while you were married and the other spouse is working 2 jobs to let you go, sometimes that minimizes the reimbursement claim. Sometimes other things come into play. And the thing is, community property can be something that's so specific where you look at case law, individual instances that match closely to your facts and apply it that way. On the other hand, some things are very broad. When you pay a $120,000 down payment on a house, that's going to be the community house with separate funds. Law's pretty clear. You only get half of that back.
Yeah.
You know? And some people understand that beforehand. Some people don't. And they come in with either the wrong expectations, they were given wrong advice, or unreasonable expectations because they think they have it.
Well, we had a whole class on community property in law school, and it was a whole section of the bar, right? And not an easy section, especially when it comes to Louisiana law and all the presumptions in this. But since we're diving into community property law, I just want to give just a basic understanding of what community property is. That's what applies in Louisiana. I know there's several other states that apply community property law
Correct.
too. But it's basically like things that you own before the marriage are considered separate property. Things that you acquire during the marriage are usually considered or presumed to be community property.
Correct.
And the reason why that's important is that once you get a divorce, the things that are community property are going to be pretty much split, for lack of a better term. Right. So if you bought property before the marriage and then you build a house on it, it might still be considered separate property. Right. Correct. But if you get married on January 1st and you buy a tract of land on January 2nd, and then you build a home on January 30th, that's considered community property, even though you made all the money before you got married. Okay. So there's several rules and exceptions and all that stuff, but just know that community property is a big deal.
It's a big deal, and
and you should have an attorney that's pretty well versed,
right? That knows and can explain it to you. It's
someone better than me. All right, don't call me about your community property questions. Call Wes.
No, and it's a lot, and it's more money, more problems, and every case is unique.